All right, everyone. So we're about 10 minutes after the hour, so maybe it's a good time to start. We plan to start in about 5 minutes, but this will save us some time for introduction. So I can start by saying, hi, my name is Josephine Ayankoya. I work under Regina's leadership as our Equity and Inclusion Officer and have been working on the Russell City Reparative Justice Project in the background since about mid-January, so very new to the city, new to Russell City, and super excited to be here today. And then maybe Regina, you're gonna
Sure, absolutely. Regina Youngblood, one of the assistant city managers here with the city of Hayward. Happy to see so many of you in person and those of you online. So,
and I'm Kathy Rodriguez. I'm from the city of Hayward. And
I am from Jessica Palmer.
Deborah Floor, Green Lane Institute, and I'm with the Alameda County Reparations Commission.
Marion Johnson, resident of Oakland, former resident of Russell City. He's happy to be here this evening.
Tony Wynn on behalf of Charles and Isabel Sanders, who own property in Russell City.
Priscilla Figueroa, my husband was a resident of Russell City.
Michael Johnson, representing Lily and Billy Batchy, and my mom, Dora Parkwell, and Russell City, and Barbara Johnson.
I'm Liz Sanchez. I am a descendant of Russell City, and I also work for the city of Hayward and live and work in born and raised, so pretty much homegrown.
I am an old descendant of Russell City and city of Hayward.
And then let's go to Carolyn.
Hi, everybody. I'm CJ. I am a descendant of Russell City residents, both my mother and father's side, residents and property owners.
Thank you, CJ. Let's go to Michael, and then we can do Gloria after.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Johnson, former resident of Russell City, representing the Patterson family who spoke at the original meeting where they were displaced.
Thank you, Michael. Ms. Gloria. Oh, Gloria, can you hear us okay? You want to do a quick introduction of who you are? Gloria, can you hear us? I think we're not able to hear you.
Oh, I can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah, you want to tell people who you are?
My name is Gloria Moore. I'm a resident and descendant of Russell City.
Thank you. And then last but not least, one of the people of our origin story here when it comes to the city of Hayward, at least being activated around this picture that you all kept alive for so long. Or can you do a chance to be our intro?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Good to see y'all again. Hey, everybody. I'm great. I'm Arstacia Berry, and I'm the former chair for the Hayward Community Services Commission, and currently I'm serving alongside Chair 4 for the Alameda County Reparations Commission. I think I know most people in the room, if not all. Good to see you all.
Lovely. Thank you all so much. So we have a short little agenda. I did email out slides for those who are attending in virtually. There may be a few more folks trickling in. We are expecting our current Community Services Commission, our current Community Services Commission chair as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Regina. I just want to very briefly go over the agenda so we know what to expect. This really is a day about celebration, acknowledgement. We understand that the work of reparative justice goes far beyond this. It's really just scratching the surface, but also want to acknowledge that there has been a lot of work for more than a year, and for many of you it's been several years, really trying to push the city to be in the space of repairing the harm of the forced relocation of so many families. So I just will briefly say thank you. I know I'm probably the newest to the bunch. I admittedly told a few folks like when I first came to Hayward, I actually did not know about Russell City. Being from Oakland, I knew more about like 7th Street and the bar and the post office, but a similar story of Black folks being displaced and having, economic communities disrupted. So really honored to just be of service, and look forward to continuing to work with you all in this new phase. So I'm gonna briefly go over the agenda, and then we'll turn it over to Regina. So we'll start with some opening remarks. I'm gonna put up some slides. There's not a lot of detail on them, but there's some information to follow along. So for folks online, you'll have a visual. After opening remarks, we'll briefly go over some of the many accomplishments that you all had. We know that you know how hard you've worked for a very long time, but just want to take a moment to acknowledge the amount of work completed and how helpful it has been to the city. Then we have several folks that are going to give some remarks. So we have Ms. Deborah from the Alameda County Reparations Commission, who's the chair. Also, Artavia is a member, and our former Community Services Commission chair, who started the apology that led to this grouping form. We are expecting about half an hour from now the current Community Services Commission chair. So all three will make remarks, and then we'll talk about updates. So what's been happening since the March 26th work session, where we are, what to expect in terms of timeline before we go back to council to try to get some, final determinations on the recommendation. And we don't have like a big chunk of time, but did want to save some time for discussion. There weren't any, no one wanted to necessarily be on the agenda for today, and that's okay, because I've done a lot of good work, but feel free to, especially with our speakers and for staff, feel free to stop with any questions, and then we have the last 15 minutes for that too. All right, any questions on the agenda?
It's not hearing anything, turn the volume.
Oh, sorry, that's a good one for sound. So because the sound is the best in this room, we've muted the computer, but we do have this phone number in. So I will ask if we can pass this little pad, but for CJ, Michael, Gloria, if we're too quiet, if you can just kind of cue us, we'll check the chat, and for folks to kind of project towards the speaker that way. So the chat, I'll bring the chat up.
Oh, I don't know, so I don't.
Oh, did it take you? Oh,
No, I don't think so. It depends on how you set the meeting up.
Okay.
And it's.
Oh, we have a chat.
But go to the more, it might say open chat.
Chat. We need a chit chat. All right, there we go. Okay, so the chat will be open. So for those of them who called in the chat or just text me, that's fine. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Regina Youngblood and pull up some slides in the background. Sorry about the delay. There we go. All right.
Are they seeing this?
Yeah, Gloria, Michael, CJ, can you see these slides okay?
Yes.
Awesome, okay. You might want to minimize that.
No, that's right.
Awesome, thank you. Again, Regina Youngblood, welcome.
Oh.
I'm Regina, yes. Hello. Just good evening.
What's your name?
My name? Yes, I'm Regina, everybody. Okay, so again, welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. As Josephine already expressed her gratitude, I want to express my gratitude for all of the hard work that this committee did. Express my gratitude for former Chair Barry for having vision and leading this Community Services Commission. You have worked hard. Your dedication has been incredible. Together we faced some challenges, but we had meaningful conversations and we've made a significant stride forward towards justice for Russell City. And tonight we just wanted to celebrate you all and again, just say thank you for all that you've done. Your unwavering commitment has been shown and it is evident, and I do appreciate you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you. And then you all have heard these words before, but just wanted to recap some of the gratitude from the last meeting. I think March 28th, y'all had about 50 people turn out. It was a lot of people. A lot of you spoke and gave their testimonies, shared your story, but just wanted to reiterate that from the city manager, assistant city manager, and also from council. There's a lot of gratitude for the work being done. And also recognition that the work is not yet done, right? I think for many of members of the community, members of the steering committee, the probably most common question has been, okay, what next and when and how soon and how serious are we really about the work that you all have done to get recommendations in the forefront and get the city thinking about what repairing harm looks like. So thank you for that. Anyone want to share any thoughts or remarks before we go over to our first speaker?
I have remarks in terms of, the Sears Group actually being the one to put forward the recommendation. That, for me, I think myself.
We can't really hear here, by the way, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
I didn't know which one I had to
I know, so we got it.
The one that looks like a calculator, that's what I thought.
That's what it is. Thank you for saying that. I just want to be clear that, although we're using those recommendations here in this process, I had no voice in that. So I'm just going along with what the city's, consultants, put forward for me. There are absolutely some great recommendations there. I just want to make sure that going forward, there is a real representation of landowners, homeowners, whose voices are actually heard and are actually put to the test in terms of really finding out what the recommendations that will fit for all the people who have been done wrong and the injustice needs to be repaired. That's all.
Thank you, Marion. And I think a lot of, the sentiment, so we'll talk a little bit about what's been happening since we were all together. A lot of the feedback was that, there's diversity in Russell City, there's a diversity of experience, of farms experience and of expectations. Definitely, I think there were a lot of conversations around the recommendations that were put forward, and we can maybe talk more about that if it's helpful. I think, generally, the thought was that if there was, a different set of recommendations, the committee would, have some consensus on what that was. And I think there was a lot of different, opinions of that. And that said, right now we're looking at how do we actually implement these ideas into action. So a lot of them, as you all heard from council, there's a recommendation to compile more, to simplify. If the big thing is we need resources to pay anything, a lot of it's just, let's just get money, period. So we can talk a bit more about some of the next steps. And I do think that as implementation plans are drafted and are getting ready to go to the city council, it'll be a good opportunity for community members, both the steering committee and at large, to really help refine what that looks like. Okay, so this, again, to express it again, and it's going to be ongoing because we know this work doesn't stop with draft recommendations being brought to council. We want to see it through to approval. We want to see people having, benefits in hand or experiencing hopefully some repair. Obviously, in my opinion, to speak for myself, I think there's some things where it's like, there may never be full repair of the harm, the spiritual, emotional, community, cultural, and what can we do now with the resources and opportunities that we have, with the momentum that we have. And I think a lot of that momentum is a testament to you all, really hard work over, more than a year. So thank you all for that.
Can I just add that, I concur that the recommendations are draft recommendations. As we know, there was no consensus. And so my expectation in moving forward is that those draft recommendations would be further refined and some type of consensus made. And I also don't want to see this project or any part of this project losing momentum, because right now it has gas. There are people that are checking in, they're looking for updates, they want to know what's happening. And so it'll be up to you guys to make sure that the community is involved and that they are aware and they know what is going on.
That's great.
Yeah, we're going to commit to establishing a cadence of communication, right? And so Josephina will talk in next coming slides about your accomplishments, but also what's been happening in the background. And a lot of times when things are happening in the background and we're not talking about what we're doing, it can give to the feeling that nothing is really happening. But we are working in the background, but what we need to do is bring that work forward and make sure that there's visibility along the way to make sure that everybody knows what's happening. So
I'm just a little bit terrified that those draft recommendations went in and that those are these are the recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the drafts.
I think the intent is to have some engagement, additional engagement from the community around whatever it is that the council will ultimately approve, because we don't know. They've received the recommendations. They still have to direct us on what they want us to actually do. And so once we know their mindset on what they want us to do, then we want to talk more with the community about what does that look like, right? Because somebody can just say, free college, that seems pretty explanatory, but for everyone, we have to get some more engagement around eligibility criteria and other things. And so there definitely will be community engagement just outside of the steering committee format.
I'm gonna say this as well. We have to be very careful because when it's put in the hands of the people who did the damage, it can recycle it.
Mhm.
So if we don't have a commitment to transparency, fair play, actually speaking to what happened, who it happened to, how it happened, we wouldn't be sitting here at this table today if land was not taken. So after the land, everyone else that was affected needs to be represented. So I'm a little terrified when you say, we. We're the we that did it. We're the ones that have to. We have to be very careful when we take ownership in a way that seems uncomfortable to the victims. Hopefully, that our feelings are priority to what other people want to happen.
Absolutely. And before I think Priscilla and Tony, I just want to add that, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after some of the remarks, but as you know, Marion, because we talked as well, and several folks, a lot of the exit interview was around, like, what does community engagement look like now? So we'll talk more about what came up, but a big thing was, like, you can't really do without us, or like nothing about us without us, right? But even if this specific iteration and this organizing body is disbanded, what does community engagement look like? There's a lot of talent and knowledge and expertise throughout the room, on the Zoom. So how do we leverage that? And I think to Marion's point, ensure that the intention behind the action is matching up. While centering those who have experienced the harm, and we know there's a lot of different folks in Russell City with a lot of different areas of harm. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know who's next. Let's go, maybe Tony and Priscilla? Or Priscilla and Tony.
Okay, we've been at this for about 3 years, or a little bit more than that, you know, from the beginning. So, it's like, with the meeting today, I feel like, okay, you're getting off the bus, you know, you're not part of the group anymore. So as a group and participants and recipients and affected parties, whatever you want to call it, I think it's only fair and right that we could, like, some kind of report, you know, what things are going on, you know. And I think we still are very interested, so if you could copy on that and give us maybe bi-monthly or monthly report what's going on, and not feel like we've dropped off the bus. I mean, I was not a resident of Russell City, my husband was, but I came in 1956 and I lived with, it was my family because we had nobody else, you know. So I feel that we deserve that much.
Definitely, thank you for that. And I think just echo Regina, for the steering committee and for the community at large, we definitely want regular communication. So we can reflect back some of that, and what we're hoping to do when we get to the discussion is really firm that up. So we're saying, hey, we would like more, we can try our best. I will say this is kind of like the only main staff team outside of like requests for help. So we are trying to be as efficient as possible, but also recognizing that it has been about 6 weeks since you've heard like really anything. So hopefully before the meeting's over today, we'll fill in the gaps of what's been discussed, and then we'll share more. Want to go to Tony? Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to make sure, like, all of us, is that we're not at the bottom. That we're not at the bottom of a stack of papers, and we'll get to that. And hopefully, you guys take a long time, hopefully, to get to us. You hope that we fade away, but we're not. We're here to stay, and we want to be off the bottom of the pile and put on the top, because this is very important. We have elderly people that are expecting something in their lifetime. Right? So we need to work on this quickly, and we need to put some urgency to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a few people on their 80s. I'm one of them. Gloria's one of them. We went to school together.
Yes.
I just made 70.
You had my club yet.
Oh, I was told that I was officially.
I think to Tony's point, you'll see for sure in the comments, I don't think that came a lot, is that we need to be urgent and intentional and definitely prioritization of elders, but not also losing sight of the full community impact, including descendant. So hopefully, we can have some reassurance, we can really, share some of what's been happening, and then get your feedback on anything else we should be considering with where we are, and, really having a strong road to implementation plans in front of council and getting some determination. So I'm gonna, oh, yes, ma'am.
Is there a date for implementation of the plan, or is that there?
I'm gonna skip this to share a little bit. I'm gonna go over this timeline. It's a rough timeline when we get towards the end. We did have a couple more things in the agenda, just, because some people are coming later, not to leave earlier, but we definitely are trying to be as expeditious as possible. And I can talk about the impact of the summer recess for city council in July, August. And then also some of the stuff we talked about, like, do we really want to go back to council with recommendations if we haven't had at least one town hall?
Because the city council, they're July 17th, right?
I don't know if there's July, is it closed all July? I think
They
early
won't
to
come back
mid-July.
until mid-August.
Mid-August, so. But we'll go over like a rough timeline for what's next to come. That was one of the big things that came up for us. So if it's okay with you lovely folks, I would love to brag about the work of the committee. I know you all know this, just very briefly. So as you know, or actually, Virginia, okay. Feel free to chime in, because I wasn't here, but I heard about it after the fact. Obviously, you all developed the steering committee, the organizing structure, you elected committee members, or officers, pardon me, committee expanded. There was a retreat with the Series Research Group. A harm reduction framework was developed for the draft recommendations. I know there's a lot of different opinions about the recommendations that were brought forth to council, but some of these is having something to consider, something to start framing the conversation with some kind of success. And this year, there was about a couple of months, I would say about 2.5 months of series of meetings and activities, surveys to prioritize recommendations. And then, so I'm kind of going out of order, but prior to that, you all supported series in getting a survey that was completed by about 377 former residents and descendants. So a lot of information was collected from a good number of people. That was used to craft the draft recommendations. Oh, hello, welcome, Austin. Then later in February, there was a survey where the 26 draft recommendations were ranked and then shared with the list of community members. I'm not sure, Regina, on that community list, there's like 400 or 500.
About 400 or 500 people that are on that list.
We have a list of that, you know, folks who signed up for the cookout, folks who signed up over time, people that come to the website and say, I want to know about Russell City, have been engaged in. And then you all had really good turnout. Most recently, about 70 folks came to the work session, and then 60 came to your last community input meeting. As you know, March 26th, the last time we were together, so you all gave the draft recommendations to City Council, hosted a work session where many of you gave your testimonies and public comment. And then in some initial meetings, these weren't necessarily, tied up with a bow and done, but there have been conversations to start thinking about the complexity of things like eligibility criteria. There also been meetings this year and then last year to start looking at a geographic information system map. So that was the map that had like different public documents like deeds and records of sale matched up with parcels. All that's been very productive in supporting the city and trying to better understand how do we do this work and how do we move it forward. And most recently, about, I would say 2/3 of the committee have given a lot of really detailed information that will reflect back some of that. That's really been to inform what you're saying right now. So what does community engagement look like in going forward? What is the path forward to getting to implementation? So that's saying kudos for all the hard work. We know it's volunteer based. It was, after your work days or your personal days in the midst of doing other justice work, because I see you all around the community doing a lot of great work. So thank you for that. Okay, so we're gonna, if it's okay with you, just for time transition, and thank you. Before we kind of move in, Austin, you'll have to expect to introduce yourself. We have a few people online, so thank you for being here. I know Austin's coming from another event in the community, and he'll be our third speaker. So what we want to do now is just kind of, because we recognize that this, I know it's been a lot of work, and y'all put a lot of time, and it hasn't always been easy, and it's still historic. It's still, in my opinion, monumental, still pushing public systems to do better. And I think part of the briefing was getting more of our external speakers, which would kind of speak more to the bigger impact on our Bay Area community about some of the work happening and how Russell City is supporting that. So I asked a few folks to come. Super excited. We have Ms. Deborah Gorman, who is our chair of the Alameda County Reparations Commission, as you mentioned earlier. We mentioned Arcadia Berry, our former CSC chair and one of the members as well of the Reparations Commission, and then Austin is our current CSC chair. So we'll just give them some time. We had up to 10 minutes. Don't feel pressure to take all the time. It's really space for them to kind of share any remarks, and then if we have time for brief questions or thoughts, you can, feel free to do that within their time. I just want to flag often if you want any snacks before or after, we have some Panera and drinks and other stuff out in the hallway. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, I'm gonna stop sharing just in case, we can see CJ and Deborah and Michael, there we go. So I'm gonna turn it over first to Ms. Deborah, let's give it up for Deborah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge, you know, the work that you all did, we're gonna stand on your shoulders. So we're learning. I came to the March 26th online, and so I listened to, you know, the summary, and it's loud and clear that equity, so Greenlighting, when we talk about equity, we talk about distribution of resources equity, we talked about procedural equity, and I feel like there's some missing procedural equity, that there were some processes, but so we're gonna learn from you all, first of all. And Alameda County, so you guys, can you imagine, we're doing 15 cities. So it's a larger footprint, and then plus incorporated and the unincorporated, and we want to make sure that they're included. So when I say I'm grateful for the work, it's literally, I have read the summary. I too, is like, we're experiencing, you know, we don't have an equity officer just named, so coming late to the process, a budget. You know, look at what you all did on a shoestring. You're like, okay, and we immediately talked about time extension and resources as a visible sign of the commitment to the work. Now, if the Board of Supervisors doesn't do it, then we're gonna have the other topics of discussion, but, you know, I really want you to know, and that's why watching you do the next step is what we are watching for sure. We are also connecting with the different efforts, both in the state of California and throughout the country, right? Because a county perspective is so different than a city perspective. So we did a bit of a literature review, Fulton County and Atlanta, of course, what they did in Evanston, like we're using all of that to inform what we'll be doing for Alameda County. So I think there's some really good foundational pieces you all did that we are learning from. And so, you know, really I wanted to express our gratitude for that work. And we see the challenge, we're experiencing that same challenge, you know, and it can be overwhelming, and what are the recommendations, or what is it we're going to produce? You know, is it just a report? Or, so we are so grateful to have you all gone before us, and then to hear, you know, the lessons learned. And I wanted to really come here to share with you that there are others who are benefiting from the work that you all did. And the other thing is, I really appreciate the candor that you all are speaking for community, and an informed opinion is the most important part, right? Because I do agree, if you let the system do its thing, it's gonna keep it moving. Mm-hmm. It's gonna, you know, sort of say, oh, thank you for the report, you know.
Yeah.
So this the continued accountability that you're demanding, you know, we're also benefiting from that, right? To see what others and other communities are doing to help us inform and do, if we can, you know, as well a job or better. And so, you know, keep on, you know, we're really, whatever our commission can do from the county perspective, happy to lift up, you know, because you're a city within the footprint, so happy to also serve as another platform for you to continue to do the work. So anyways, let's end with that, and how our commission is really looking to build on what you all have done.
Lovely, thank you, Deborah. And thank you for your service in Octavia. Also, we have CJ from this steering committee, who's also a member of the countywide commission as well. So thank you all for your service and your leadership. I think we have a couple, maybe a minute or two. Any questions for Deborah or, yeah, Mary?
In terms of how you incorporate what the state is doing in reparations and how that will assist you, are there things that you're pulling from the state as well as from Russell City to sort of craft out and carve out what you all are going to be putting forward for the county?
Yeah, I mean, the state report, 1,100 pages, over 105 recommendations, but you have to ground it in your community history and data, right? So even though at a state level, at the end of the day, you have to do your, what was the impact, right? It's because what is the repair? So you can take sort of the guiding principles, and I've been at several, I even testified on the task force twice. I testified on this, testified on the technology piece and on the economic impact. So we have to do the work of what was the harm done in our footprint of the 15 different cities and the 8 unincorporated. Like, you have to understand that what happened, you know, in Hayward is not going to be the same as what happened in Berkeley. It's not going to be the same. So take sort of that perspective. But I think the guiding principles, we're sort of grounded in their same, the United Nations principles of, you know, it's satisfactory, which means you got to keep asking, right? Even if you do a plan, you do a survey and say, is it satisfactory? And the community will say no, or the community say, yes, that was satisfactory. And you come back the next year, right? So the principles that they outlined, I think, are also guiding us. And the last thing that I will lift up is the narrative is so important. Like, we're realizing that people's attitudes and approach, we literally spent an hour just talking about the narrative around and looking for the allyship, because even within communities of color, there is not consistent support. So how you manage the narrative and how you manage the allyship is going to also help keep the effort, right, living in the community and making sure that we have some of the reparative work happening.
I have a question. Is Russell City the only entity that Alameda is focusing in, or is there other entities within the Alameda County?
Other cities? So,
Okay, yes. So to be very frank, we are very early in our
we started in
research.
January.
We just started, really.
We started in January.
But we do anticipate we'll have to study each, city, all 15, and really unearth what's going on and what has going on. So we're at the very beginning. We're hoping that there's existing research that can help us kind of move more efficiently. But Russell City is a part of it, and we expect that obviously there's gonna be things out of Oakland, out of Berkeley, and we're gonna have to discover what else has happened throughout our domain.
So currently, it's only Russell City at this time?
Well, I think City of Berkeley has some efforts. I think they're talking statewide, Wednesday about some of their efforts. But I guess to, what Ms. Berry is saying is that, like, the amount of, like, we know a lot about Russell City partly because of all the work that you all have done, but say in Union City, it could be a different story. Sally Angel is different, and Albany is different.
So how are you?
Yeah, no, but I was talking right now as we speak, you know. Is that the only project you actively working in, or is there more coming in? I just want to know where we are in that.
And let me offer it this way, so the county has different jurisdictions, right? Like, a county does not, the departments in the areas that they have influence and control over is different than a city. So we have to work within the jurisdiction of a county. So a county has a health department, but not a police department, right? So we're looking at, yes, by city, but within where the county has authority. So for us, where we're starting is, what is all the different equity areas within the department? So I'm going to use health because the health department is the strongest right now in having centered Black community health, right? So they have equity efforts happening there, and I think 22 departments. So we're looking within, where does the county have jurisdiction? Where are their centers of influence? Where did they create the harm? So they repair the harm they created. So the cities will help us inform within those departments, right? So we do have to play within a certain box that is different than how you all, engaged in the process. So we're still in sort of our fact finding.
Does this answer your question?
Yeah, because you're asking to, other cities doing, you all are well ahead in terms of what are the other 15 cities.
So you just
so
said
Hayward
right
is
now
ahead.
that you're focusing on, people of color, Black people.
Mhm.
Is there anything focusing on Latinos?
People of color, inclusion.
Or are we together in the same, I just want to clarify within myself and then for the rest of the people, because, like Russell City was, composed of many different, races, well, not races, we're all humans. But, I mean, different, backgrounds, there were Hawaiians, there were, Dutch or whatever they were, Plus, I think we agreed that there was like 40 and 40, Latinos and 40 Blacks, and then 20% of the people that lived in Russell City were various, backgrounds.
But understand, when they use that term, the, brown, you're
Yeah.
included in that. You're included.
People of color means,
People of color.
yeah,
you-
that's people that are brown.
Yeah.
Brown, all brown people.
What is the county? Is it African American Reparations Commission?
So we have talked about, we are unapologetically, looking at Black African American community.
Mhm.
We're grounding it in, slavery. And if you look at other communities, yes, especially if you look at, Asian communities who were incarcerated and property taken. But we are really, at this point, it's fair to say that we are really centered on the Black and African American community. And that's why allyship is so important, right?
I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I think that, no, but I think
understand that.
yeah, and I think probably like when you start to discover that harms were done to different communities at different times. But I think if your guiding principles of, what was the guiding principle? Well, if it was free labor and you were brought, to California,
Right.
and you build on that, then you can understand the different harms that happen at different times, right? So we could talk about, the Japanese community being interned, right? But that's not, our commission is with the Black community. We're not looking at the whole. Okay.
And if I may, just for time stuff, I want to make sure we have time.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great,
Exactly.
because, as long as the speakers are around, they're welcome to chime in the conversation. I just want to make sure our past and current CSC chair have a chance to make remarks, and then you all can continue questions about, I see Michael has a hand, so do you remember your question?
Well, I was just gonna say, from what you're saying, you just started with Black community. Then you go to Black community, you'll go to the other, people that were affected. You know what I'm saying? Right now, you gotta start somewhere. So basically, it's not for me, you started with the Black community that was
The ones
affected.
that were done the most harm.
Then it'll go down to the next community that were,
You have a hand on that.
ethnic groups that were affected. That's what it sounds like. to me.
Yeah.
Gloria.
If I were to just respond to that, I think it was very similar here where, the work of the Hayward Commission started, COVID sort of highlighted things. Then Brother Floyd was murdered, and that lifted up sort of this, clarion call around standing up for Black lives. But as we dug into Russell City, we discovered it wasn't just Black folk.
Right.
And so I would anticipate that as we go through discovery, it's gonna be the same thing. We're gonna discover there's more, and we're gonna need to put data and narrative around the more.
Great. And that's a great segue, because our next speaker is actually Ms. Arcadia Berry, one of my sorors. So, and thank you for starting with that. So we're super excited to have you here, because we know you really were a part of the origin story of the city of Hayward, taking some action. We're really the mastermind behind, for lack of better words, behind the apology. So we'd love to turn it over to you for your remarks, and then following Arcadia, if it's okay, we'll go to Austin, and then maybe we can take some discussions together before talking about program steps. So let's give it up for Ms. Arcadia. Love y'all. So Arcadia, some love.
First, thank you, for the invitation to be here. Thank you for everyone who sits around this room that either survived what happened in Russell City or are descendants, so you saw your parents and grandparents go through it. Give you all honor and respect. You know, a lot of this work, you know, there's two principles that I'll lead with, and then I'll just have a few reflections about this. The first principle is the idea of Sankofa. Some people have heard this term, maybe you haven't. It's an Akan word. Out of Ghana, it means to look back and retrieve, right? How do you look back and retrieve, and what is that? How does that principle show up in our lives? And so for me, that's a value that I walk with, you know, in all my work. You know, learn from what happened in the past, bring those learnings with us to the future, go back and get the things that we should have brought with us. Sometimes you got to go get them and bring them forward. And so a lot of how I try to be present in the work is founded and centered on that. The other thing that I want to say is that there's a lot of people that have worked on this issue for many, many years, well before the Hayward Community Services Commission stepped on the ground. And so we want to really acknowledge the other people who laid so much groundwork way before I was even born. And it's because of them that when our turn came, we were in a position to say something. I've learned that people will erase you from the narrative. They will erase your community, they'll erase your name, and so it's on us to continue to tell our stories and to continue to be present. So I do also want to reflect that when I first came onto the Community Services Commission, you know, those, 5 or 6 years ago, the charge was to very specifically hand out this $1 million. Here's what the city typically does, thank you, and go home, right? That was kind of it, and I was a little discouraged by that, and many of us got together and said, what's the charter? Let's pull up the paperwork from the city and see what's the breadth of our capacity here, what autonomy, what authority can we exercise beyond just handing out this $1 million every year based on sort of historical favorites, right? And that wasn't received very well. The fact that we pulled that charter out and saw that we had a much, much broader charge. But we took ownership of that. And so number one, I want to share that to say, take ownership of your own experiences. Don't wait for the city. We have to, as residents and cities, continue to be vocal and not wait for power to be given to us. We have to assume our power and stand in our power. And that's how the Community Services Commission went from rubber stamping a handful of proposals to having conversations around racial equity. What does it mean to apply a racial equity lens to the grants we were given? What does it mean to look at the entire city and actually see what the heck is going on and speak up and stand up for the residents here in Hayward? So when the pandemic came about, again, we were standing on many years of work, many years of folks who came before us. And the pandemic showed us sort of this heightened sense of disparity amongst Black folks, brown folks. We were hit the hardest. And then shortly thereafter, Brother Floyd was murdered, and it was broadcast all over social media, right? So now you have everybody talking about, you know, Minnesota and, you know, all around the world we're marching and we're making all these stands, and I thought it was beautiful and fantastic. But then inside of our own Community Services Commission had not made a statement about what went on right down the street on Winston. And so that's how this conversation really began. If we're going to speak up for Minnesota, then we have an obligation to speak up for Russell City. And at that time, we had commissioners who were very, very compassionate and present in the moment and wanting to figure out not only how to properly respond to what was going on as far as the COVID pandemic hitting our communities, but thinking critically about how do we raise our voice as a commission around not only what was going on in Minnesota, but what happened right here. And, you know, I tell this story because, again, folks will erase it. Folks will erase it and forget that it was everyday citizens who lifted this up. The city didn't wake up and say, hey, it's time for us to say sorry. That never happened. It was the people who sat on the commission who had a conscience and a heart and a mind to serve and say, we can't be hypocrites, talking about the Midwest when we got things going on here. So that gave us a platform to be able to really lift up and say, let's look at the history together. How do we begin this work? And at that time, we had a council member who wanted us to kind of lead that process. And it took us a year, y'all. So when you talk about process and government, I want to encourage you, One of the other things we learned is that this is messy, it's frustrating, and it takes a lot of time. It took us a year, and there was a subcommittee of commissioners from the commission who actually got together and said, how do we write this thing? And so, yeah, I threw the kitchen sink in that and then we all got together and said, okay, what's real? What can we really do? And the four of us were, I'm gonna tell you, we were unashamed, unapologetic, and bold in saying, leave it all in there. Leave it all, and let the council figure out how to grapple with it. And thus you saw that apology go forward, that subset of us, myself, Nick Rubio, who now works for the city, Crystal, and Artie was the fourth that stood before the city council and made the presentation where they unanimously passed the apology. The second learning I want to share is it was never intended to be the end. It was intended to open up the start of a conversation for healing. So it was never intended that, hey, we got the city to apologize. Let's go. No, that was the beginning. That was a tool that we were then able to hand to you all to say, hey, we struck while the iron was hot, and we're not passing the baton back to the city, we're passing the baton to the residents, the descendants, to the survivors, and urging the city to work with you all. And so while I was on the Community Services Commission, we kept our eye on the ball. Because the third learning is, as people rotated off the commission, so did the memory of what went on. And so it's not that people are maliciously letting go and saying, hey, forget those recommendations. We're losing institutional knowledge as people rotate out. So who's going to be charged with the gatekeepers, right? I went through 4 different community services reps from the city during my tenure on the commission. So we can say the city, this entity, but the reality is that the city employs humans, and those humans rotate in and out. And so the Community Services Commission said, we're going to take responsibility to keep our eye on the ball. So every month, there's a standing item that says, what's going on with Russell City? What's going on with Russell City? We're going to keep hammering it in because we understood the rotation of people, right? And that leaves us where you have to worry, what's going to happen, right? So moving forward, a few things that I just want to encourage you with. We have some learnings, right? We've reached back and had some learning. We learned that, we all know this, denying Black folks leads to the environment that we're in now. Look at what's going on academically, look at homelessness, look at all of it. We are overrepresented across the board in everything, and we're the smallest part of the population. That has to change. We learned that everyday citizens can organize, vocalize, create change, right? We did that. Here, you all did that, and it's steadily becoming a symbol, not just for California, but for the country. The New York Times picked this up, CBS picked this up. People are watching what's gonna happen here. So we still have this opportunity. The gas is in the tank. We have momentum to show what is possible through everyday citizens, not through the government, through us, right? We've learned that the process is rocky. Some are gonna always disagree. I was kind of scared because I started getting some weird letters at my home during this process from folks who disagree. We have to understand that all hearts and all minds will not be changed, and that is okay. Because there's enough hearts and minds that have changed where we can continue to proceed forward. So I would love to see us after tonight, and I'm anxious to hear the next steps too. I don't think we should leave this project in the hands of the city, respectfully. I think there has to be some sort of oversight, either a Russell City committee or commission, or perhaps the CSC would adopt this and continue to own it and watch it as a part of the CSC work. I don't know where it should be held or owned, but we all know with all the transitions that happen, it can too easily be lost. And all of us have worked really hard to get this far. And I do believe that there's real reparation and restitution at the end of this, but we have to stay committed. And I'm also excited to be working with Chair Ward to not only advance it through the county, but also continue to lift the name of Russell City up as we move through that process, as well as at the state level. So again, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of this community, for embracing me. Shout out to the Golden Girls who are not here. Thank you to Gloria Moore, who embraced me as a daughter and taught me so much of the history of Russell City. I am forever an ally and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. Give it up for Octavia. Thank you, Octavia, and a lot of really good sentiments, and hopefully some of the next steps will speak to that. I want to, before we do Q&A, maybe invite Austin, if you want to come up to the table. We have our mic is this little calculator looking thing here. So Austin, I know you had to come for another meeting. You want to come up to who you are?
Perfect, I appreciate it. Austin Barton-Creo, I'm the chair of the city's Community Services Commission. I want to thank the prior speakers. I want to also uplift our former chair, Octavia. I've spent the past decade working in local and state government. I actually had the honor of working on the guiding document that set up the Reparations Commission for the county. I hear your comments, Octavia, that government is a slow and burdensome process, and that is especially accurate in the county. Over a decade ago, the county issued a formal kind of one-page apology for its lack of weighing in or having the guts really to say anything about slavery. One page, a little milk down, kind of watery resolution. It took a decade to get from that resolution to what is an equally watered down resolution that established this Reparations Commission. The words Russell City are not contained. When, to your question, is laser focused on African Americans, laser focused. It also took, from the point of passing that resolution to seating the commission, how long? Over a year?
Over a year.
Over a year. As everyday members of the community, the county is not known for timeliness, it is not known for caring, it is not known for responsiveness. And I tell you, someone that has spent, again, over a decade, has spent 8.5 years working for Alameda County, it is not our strong point. The only way that you make change in local government is by giving them hell. And so after we lost, giving them hell, making sure that you are there, you are present, you are heard from. To Octavia's point, there's an item on the Community Services Commission agenda that talks specifically about racial equity. After Octavia, or I think right before Octavia was leaving, I asked one meeting, what is this item and why is it here? Because we would receive kind of a really kind of broad update from city staff, but there was no action item, no tangible, what are we doing? We're just kind of talking. And I think I asked the question, and then someone raised their hand and said, what about CAP, which is the Chief's Advisory Panel? It advises the Chief of Police here in the city of Hayward. You probably don't know that this body exists because it does not meet publicly. It does not operate as any other commission in the city of Hayward. And when the CSC attempted to drive forward a process, we spent a great deal of time talking about how do we make sure that that CAP operates fairly. Just like the Planning Commission, those interviews should be public. Just like the Youth Advisory Commission, they should have a code of ethics that they have to abide by, and that should include potential financial disclosures. Because the body that's advising our Chief of Police should be held to the same standard as every other commission. Unfortunately, what we saw, we got our hands slapped by the city. And so while I appreciate this effort, I agree with the chair, with all due respect, the city cannot drive the process. And it cannot be that we have created a report, we have some recommendations, and we walk away. You need to continue to come to those meetings. So my ask for you, as someone who is an activist at heart, pick a buddy at this meeting today and make sure that you call that buddy every single month and say, what meeting are you going to? What part of the process are you continuing to plan? Because the CSC cannot drive it. City staff change, as we've talked about, volunteer members of the commission change of the CSC since that resolution or the letter came from the CSC. We have one member out of 17 that remains. Her name's Linda Moore, and she's wonderful. But just Linda. And Linda soon will appreciate her term limits, and then she'll actually, I assume, no longer have a seat on the commission, which will mean no one on the CSC was there when we did whatever we did in that process to go ahead and start driving the ball regarding that would be my ask today, is that you all, show up and continue to show up, because, this process has the potential to be another report that goes on a shelf. And you spent a lot of time and energy and told painful stories. And we need to make sure that that is not in vain and that that matters.
The reason I mentioned that is the fact, in 1973, when HUD came in, I worked with Charles Santana, and I was named a citizen at large. So we went around the different areas of Alameda County, and the group, we were all involved, you know, and the group had to vote who would be the area that they would spend their first year, you know, to make improvements in the neighborhood and have either grants or low-income loans, you know, for people. So, but we were really involved, and we chose, and the following year was somebody else, you know. But there was answers, and we weren't just told, you know, it'll take a while, whatever, you know. We took action back then, you know, 1970, then that's a long time ago, you know, but maybe there were not all this extra red tape that there is now, you know. So that's why I asked the question, you know, is Russell City is the first one in the Alameda County that we're working with. That's why I asked the question.
I think there's been a great deal for stories of Russell City being told in NBC, a host of other outlets that have heard the story. When you say stories, it's more painful stories is a good way to say it, but more importantly, the words we use, the painful truth of what happened cannot be denied. So as long as we continue to show up and make our presence known regardless of what someone is saying, when you talk too much, yeah, I do. And I'll be here tomorrow, but I'll see you at the next meeting. And I'm going to continue, and that's what we have to be very diligent about, is making sure that we continue to tell the truth of our history, because it is American history. And it's important that that story, the truth, continues to be told. So that I'm very thankful, Dartae, we had a conversation about what you did, because I would have never found out through Gloria Moore that my great-grandfather and my grandmother actually testified. So they historically have a place in history, and we have to do the same thing. Thank you, Gloria, for telling us about the testimony and the hearings. I mean, it's very important that we have that information, and now that we're so immersed in social media, it's always going to be able to find it. So we're never going to lose it. So why not tell the truth? Someone's going to see it later. My great-grandchild might see what I said. So showing up is important.
I'd just like to respond to Austin when he said how slow the government is. They were hella fast when they got rid of Russell City. So, you know, where is that gas to come back and undo the pain that you did? You were fast in erasers. Now, how fast will you be to repair it?
All right. Thank you for that, Tony. And thank you, Austin. Thank you also, Arcadia. I want to try to give some quick updates. I think the discussion has been great, and I think there'll be more to share. And I'll be brief with this so we can get through it. And I guess I can say I don't want to come off as like trying to say the right thing, because it's not about that. It's not about me. It's not about Regina. It's not about any staff working here. I will tell you that this is a top priority. I'm sure like these priorities have a lot of work to make sure that this is like I'm as available as possible for this. I am one person, so we are working to kind of leverage the bigger people power of the city. And also recognize that some things are not gonna, like, some things are required. Some things are gonna be the place of city staff, and other things are some roles that we can fill. So I'll just be brief. This is a recap of the project plan that you all probably are familiar with. It basically recaps what you just stated. So we're in phase 4, where we're working to move towards city council taking action. This next slide basically breaks it down in a bit more detail. So kind of break this down for you kind of the way. Where we are now essentially is we're looking on March 26th, we got direction from council. We've been looking into primarily what resources it'll take to implement different plans, and understanding that for some things, like for example, one of the top recommendations is fair compensation. So thinking about property values, that's different for folks who own the land versus who are tenants there, right? That's something that there definitely needs to be invested in resources. Like I personally am not a real estate expert, right? So there's some work like having parcels and having maps for known parcels we can compare. A lot more work where if the city and maybe other entities are invested in going forward with that recommendation. So some of those things are, we're trying to get enough meat like on the bones for them to chew on to say yes, and then move forward with that. So that's where we are now, is really working towards getting city council approval. I just want to go over this because I think these are where some of the questions have come up. We've pretty much gone through up until today. So I'm going to, for time, just go towards the bottom. So we know we're at this closing meeting. While it's an end of the steering committee and this organizing structure, it's by no means end of the engagement obligation and the communication that we want to have with all the former residents and descendants from Russell City. So that will be ongoing. The plan is for it to look somewhat different in this next phase. And that's why in the exit interviews the last couple of months, I've been trying to get you all feedback about what that should look like, including today. The additional feedback is very helpful. So the plan for the next several weeks, I'll say next 6 weeks, is to really finish developing implementation plan options. So those will be, with the direction of council, a little bit more batched. A lot of it's on the type, so things like looking into compensation in general, whether it's general basic income or fair compensation. Some of the core systemic things around we need to have a way to fund this, they're kind of batched together. But council may vote on one or the other differently depending on, you know, what they determine. But the goal is to have, like I've said to Regina several times, like I want to make it, we both want to make it very difficult to say no to anything. So the goal is to really find the resources or find a path towards reallocating resources to get to a yes answer. There also are a lot of other ideas, these plans, and I can share a bit later about developing more funds. So we are aware definitely we can try to write grants. We want to bring on other, you know, municipalities and businesses to support, and we want to account for what can Hayward do like by itself, just in a tiered approach. In the summer, we do want to start some more community engagement prior to going back to council. So you all got a chance to weigh in on that mapping tool. I think there were some outstanding concerns around people opting in and having their family deeds there. Other folks have reached out saying, I really need help. You know, this kind of tool would be helpful. So by summer, we do want to introduce what we have, which is not all the deeds, but it has a quick way for folks to map like what's past, what's present, get a sense of, hey, what business is on the land that we used to live in? So right now, it's a very limited kind of elite group, so to speak, that has access. We want everyone to have access to that. That can also be helpful down the line, depending on what eligibility criteria come up for folks. And we know that it is not meant to be conclusive because we don't have everything. There still are missing documents from the county as well. So July and August, we want to be sharing the implementation plan options with former residents and descendants before it goes back to council. July and August is also council will be on recess. So the goal is to have like, you know, this is top of the agenda when I get back from recess, and ideally within 2 meetings, that's our hope, to get to some kind of determination. So we expect to first deliver an informational report where all the different short-term, mid-term, budget impacts, how might you do this, enough to make a decision can be, all that can be clarified, and then we expect council may want a second meeting. The second one is where we plan to have a public hearing and where there is an approval. So you guys see your hand, give me just 1 second, I'll go over 2 more things, I'll go to you next. And then the plan is after that for staff in the fall, so early, ideally August, September, to be delivering the report and getting to a determination, and then following that with continued implementation. Let me just stop sharing so we can see you, CJ. Yeah, take a question.
Did you say someone else or me? I can't tell.
Oh, no, it's you.
Okay. So I don't know if I missed it because I am a slightly multitasking, I won't lie. But hearing the key parts. So one of the things with land being occupied now by businesses that legitimately acquired that land, and I think somewhere in one of my responses was the land that is currently owned by the city of Hayward or controlled by the city of Hayward, like the golf course and the airport. Where is there conversations about what the viability is of that as a replacement property? Or replacement property?
In terms of restoring that land, like to descendants and residents?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't take land away from existing owners because they have a legitimate deed and they did a legitimate potentially title search. Yeah, I'm just wanting to make sure that that's not being lost as a viable alternative.
No, it's not being lost. There was at least 4 council members that said that they'd be interested in us bringing them information about a land trust. And so that's where that would fall in. It may not be the airport or the golf course, but there was some significant interest, especially from Councilmember Syrup, in finding land that we acquire or that we already have that could go into a land trust. So I think Josephine is doing some research around that. That's something where we don't have the expertise ourselves. As Josephine said, we need to work with people that know how to develop land trusts where there isn't a conflict of interest to see if we could do something like that. But that is one of the recommendations.
Well, that's not quite the same as returning the land. A land trust is putting it into someone else as a steward for the land. And the residents who own their land didn't need a steward. They needed their land. And so I want to be clear that a land trust is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a return of land or an acceptable alternative to the land that was taken directly back into the hands of the descendants who are capable of stewarding their own land. But land trusts are interesting, but I want to be clear that that's not the recommendation. A land trust is a tool for someone else to steward it on our behalf, and we're asking for our land back. That's very different. But I hear you. I appreciate that, but please, people just want their land back. And if you can't give back the original land, you have other land, and we're asking for that to be the alternative. And so it's different than a land trust. I just want to clarify.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
And we can,
Homeowners signed grant deeds to Alameda County, who in turn sold it to Hayward.
Mhm.
So they signed for the land for whatever money they received, all homeowners.
yeah,
Oh,
at least
landowner.
someone like they're coerced into doing it where they didn't have a choice or the market
Yeah.
rate was, way lower. So I think this is, adding on to what TJ said, definitely can, add that to our research. I will say part of what, the priority has been based on what we got as I know some people feel like the recommendations from series were not the collective or representative recommendations. So that, I think, one that, because of how the recommendations were packaged, was not necessarily something that was voted on, high up there. So we are looking into several different options. I think I can say admittedly in the last 5 weeks, a lot more time has gone into looking at what is our budget capacity for fair compensation and not as much this current land. But as Virginia mentioned, I think that was one of the direction points, was thinking about the Surplus Land Act, which is, I think, the main policy that could have implications for giving away public land. What can we do to put the land back into the hands of the owners? Yes, CJ?
Yeah, I just want to say too, that's one of the dangers of presenting the consultants that are paid by the city of Hayward, whether shade on whether they are ethical or not, to put forth their recommendations as the only thing the city council will look at. We wrote those addenda to those recommendations to be clear that, in fact, owners of land weren't fairly considered. We can go on and on, but they're there. So it's really important that what doesn't happen is that the recommendations, some of which were duplicative to things that already are done, like an apology. I didn't even understand that as a recommendation. We've already been apologized to, and it was another recommendation, that those are packaged by Cirrus, who is a paid consultant of the city, and they are not reflective of a process of getting community feedback in any way. And so it's just really important that that continues to be clear about whose recommendations they are. Those are the recommendations of Cirrus, a consultant paid by the city. And if we proceed to use that and just kind of decline to outline those other things, then those kinds of things like the request for a real return of land will be left off permanently. So I just want to say that we just always have to proceed by saying those are Cirrus's recommendations, not necessarily the community's recommendations, because otherwise the request for our land back gets lost into some other stuff.
Well, I'll just say that not everybody on the steering committee feels the same way. There were several members of the steering committee that contributed to the retreat, where some of the framework, where the whole harm framework came from. The survey also of the community helped to inform those recommendations. And while the city provided the funding for this entire process, there was feedback from the steering committee and members of the larger Russell City community in the development of those recommendations, which may have been written down and provided by Siri. And there was a ranking process that you, the steering committee, participated in, and that the larger Russell City community participated in. So there's support, large support for the recommendations that came forward. Now, that said, I understand that there was no consensus reached by the steering committee around importance or what the full set of recommendations would be. And the decision was made by the steering committee to let the community see those recommendations and help to rank them. Now, all of the addendums were provided to City Council. They reviewed them, and they used them as well as the recommendations in giving direction to us. So I don't want it to be said that they didn't review that or that they were not considered. And so I want that to be clear for the record. But what we have are directions from council, we have the recommendations, and we are working on what we've been asked to work on by council. And we're at this stage in the process.
It's kind of looking, Michael B, I see your hand. I can skim through a couple things and then get to the rooms. I know we have about 10 more minutes. Is that okay? And I'll go to you first, Michael. One more thing I will add, one of the recommendations, I know it's probably not worded in a way that really fits the spirit of what folks are saying, but I think it says, property restoration and or fair compensation. So all that to say, the buckets of exploration there, we have flexibility to put forward like our best set of options, and we'll definitely take that as a part of that too, CJ, to your point around specific actions around returning land and what that looks like, because we did have at least, while not several folks that specifically, that concept was supported at the meeting. And we're in this phase now where we're looking into all the options to put them forward with the hope that as many as possible get approved, and we have been really front loading where we saw community priority, which was around compensation, and then also some restoration. So let me just really briefly share that. I want to go back to Michael, D, to location related. Thank you, Michael. Just kind of where we are summer-wise, I think we got through most of this. So again, the goal is to make implementation plans and go through this detail to really clarify, like, what do you mean, what level of resource, even thinking of, let's say, this example that CJ raised. One of my first questions is like, okay, how many folks will be entitled to land? How many families? How many descendants? How far down do we go? Is it sliced up? You know, how many plots? So there's many questions that could come up, which is why the continued community engagement that we want this summer is going to be important. So the hope is to make sure that we kind of review that with community members before it goes to council, so that it's not, you know, as much as possible.
It already feels like something about that. It's by the conversation from the show. It's by the tone of her conversation.
Do I get a chance to speak?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, can you give me 1 second? I'm sorry. Mike, give me 1 second, because I want to make sure you get the you're waiting. Just for, really quickly, because I want to make sure we have concerns and good communication. I emailed these slides out, we can go over it. This is just high level showing some of, resource-wise we're looking at. So it's trying to get a sense of what's available, just basic city funds, right? So there's operating funds, several different ones. In short, we're looking at all the dollars that are currently available are budgeted, so it's really about offsetting that. Capital funds that might have a bit more of a limited scope and is more available for things like public art, but that deals with things like infrastructure or capital improvement. Like I mentioned, we want to look into development or fundraising through private entities. That will likely be a second tier. Our first goal is what can the city do with the current budget and the current, you know, funds coming in. And then we do want to explore partnerships with other groups, including other government municipalities, but hopefully some public-private partnerships. So we are trying to really diversify potential resources that are available. I want to pause here because I know there's a couple questions online that, just one second, Michael. I want to pause here, but just to say that these two slides are basically a summary of a lot of what's been said already, but it speaks to what engagement should look like in going forward. Let's go to Michael now. Michael's had his hand up, and then we'll do, I think, Marion, you are next, and then we'll go, 209, I'm not sure if this is Gloria. Michael? Give me 1 second, thank you.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I just want to make sure that we clarify the characterization of the survey as a vehicle to inform the recommendations. To be clear, when you look at the raw data that was shared with us, it becomes very apparent that there is not a reasonable assessment that can be made that the survey was used to inform the recommendations. If so, one, there would have been no recommendation for an apology that we had already received. Two, when you look at the number of people who weren't even born that took the survey, yet claimed that they were actual landowners. There were in fact over 24 of those responses in the survey from people who were 12 years or younger who stated that they were landowners who weren't alive at the time. And then finally, what I would suggest is we talked about this retreat. There were no recommendations that came out of a retreat. What we got out of the retreat was ideas and committees that were supposed to be formed that never were. To be clear, Siri's last meeting with the steering committee was on September 13th. We didn't get a document from them until January. So to suggest that somehow the recommendations were created by the steering committee from a group that hadn't entertained or communicated with the steering committee at all would be, I just want to be clear that the foundation on which all of those recommendations were built. And then finally, when we suggest that the community endorsed the 26 recommendations, when you look at the way that the city put out the questionnaire to the community, the way they were ranked, they took all of the things that were quote unquote low risk and placed them at the top of a tool that was difficult to navigate by the community at large. So when you look at what the results come out of that survey, which was created by Siri's recommendations, then what we have is an ill-informed ranking of recommendations by a consultant that was paid by the city to represent our work. So I just want to be clear that all of these things, how they're set forth, what they look like, was created and funneled to build a narrative that suggests that we as a steering committee endorsed recommendations that we had no opportunity to provide input to, and when asked, didn't have an opportunity for our input to be even considered.
Thank you, Michael. I have got a couple quick notes. I think Marion has hand up, 209, I'm not sure about the Gloria, and then we'll go to Arcadia just briefly, because as you all know, I wasn't here for all of it. I will say for the last survey, that's something that, I worked with Liz and Aisha on, so we kind of went with the leadership of the committee at the time. I understand that the 26 recommendations from series, there is disagreement with it, and some folks have said they more or less get at what they were trying to say, others they did not. I know from the feedback I was getting from committee members at the time, we ranked it by alphabetical order. So compensation was the very first thing, followed by guarantee and non-repetition, which overall was ranked lower. I know it was very clunky. There were several different ideas of how it could be set up. And I think that we went through different iterations and tried to be as responsive as possible to the chair and co-chair at the time. That said, there was, again, the option for the committee to, for some time, at least a couple months I was on, to say, if it's not these 26 recommendations, like what do we want now? And some people did. Some people gave addendums, some people gave specific details. There were a lot of meetings where city staff weren't there. I think I would encourage, with where we are now, again, can't change hearts and minds, but there is the desire to really get to repairing harm. I think Well, for me personally, just speak for myself. I have no, and I'm not, it's not about me personally, right? I just suffer through it, I'm not harmed here. I'm just saying that I have no, motive,
So my voice is, I feel like my voice is being silenced because you want to get across what you want to get across right
Oh, no,
now.
no,
That's what it feels like to me right now, just saying. That's what
Okay,
it feels
now-
like to me right now,
okay.
that you want to continue a conversation. Ms. Youngblood herself said she's had conversation with other members of the committee. I haven't had a conversation with Ms. Youngblood. I've sent emails to Ms. Youngblood, and she didn't respond to me. So whatever conversations that she had, she responded to me later after 3 or 4 times down the road when Sirius had already disconnected from us. Then she was able to email me. But she said she's had conversations with people who were in, Russell City, and everyone has their own story and truth.
Mhm.
And everyone should be heard. But when I hear that you discuss things with other people, and I haven't had a conversation with you, and you're adamantly defending what they are saying without any defense of what you haven't heard from me, it is clear to me there's an agenda that's going forward that doesn't include me and my family. That's the way it looks to me, and
I can,
there's nothing that at this point, because you've already done what you've done.
well, Ms. Miriam,
Mhm.
I, sorry you feel that way. And what most people in this room don't know is because before this steering committee even existed, I met with you multiple times, with you and Ms. Artega.
Mhm. Yes. Yes,
Here's
about the
your-
arts and the picnic and that kind of, yes.
No, and
About the
about the
picnic and that.
apology. About the apology.
About the apology, but not the steering. This is before the steering,
That's what I
prior
said,
to the
before,
steering
before
committee.
it even got
Oh, let me
created.
finish.
I saw the meeting. Yeah, I saw your guidance on how to start it. But again, I think what Josephine said is we're trying to get to repair, and we can't get to repair if we're pointing fingers at one another.
You brought the conversation up about speaking to people. I didn't.
No,
You did that.
I'm.
Can I offer, I know, Mary, you had your hand up, right? I can skip my comments, I was trying to clarify some stuff. I know, Gloria also had a hand up, so did Michael, and this number, I think Arcadia, and we are right at the end, but I do wanna make sure we end kind of in as productive of a space as possible. So I think if there's like last comments, maybe we can kind of add that here just to the benefit of the group, or just talk separately, and then maybe, to Kathy's suggestion, kind of stick with a little bit of the agenda. Well, no, I'm just saying, well, just for now, because I think I asked everyone, like, we had agenda items, please let me know, I didn't hear responses, I want to be respectful both of the time. I think y'all have done a lot of great work, and we want to make sure there's opportunities to have some closure and also to be informed about next steps, in good faith, regardless of how it's received. So, I'm going to give you the floor again, Ms. Merriman, but
I'm done.
you're done, okay. And then just to clarify, my only thing I was saying was going back, and again, I wasn't here for most of it to say that, but where we are now, we're looking to implementation. Realistically, what council approves may not be, this is verbatim how Siri said it. A lot of it was less vague than us, but fill in more. So in this next phase that, y'all have the slides, there's opportunity to still inform what that looks like. Including, hey, we feel there's something got left on the cutting room floor. Let's go, Kendra, let's go, I think, Gloria, are you two alone?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay,
Can you hear me?
real quick, let's go Gloria, and then, sorry, 209, I'm not sure who that is. That would be, Velda, okay, then Velda, or actually Arcadia, Velda, and then Francesca. Okay, Gloria.
Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you very much for the meeting. For me, personally, I hope that we can move forward and that we don't continue to rehash what happened in the past. I think we're all on the same page. I've never understood why there's so much, the group it's always so contentious, our meetings. I agree 100% with what Carolyn has said and the Johnsons and reclaiming our land. I think that's, we know we're not getting that land back, but some land, some type of just and fair compensation for the harm. And I also agree with the recommendations that were set forth by the series group. And I think that we're just all on the same page. You know, maybe we don't agree. I don't, with all of those, the 26 recommendations, but many of those recommendations, I think we can all be on the same page. We worked hard and, that's what we ended up presenting to the community. And I also appreciate what Artavia said. I think that we need to have some type of committee or commission. I don't think that the city of Hayward can just go out and present to the community at large. It might not be the same group that we have now, but I think we need to have somebody speaking on behalf of the citizenry of Russell City. It's not just the city of Hayward calling the meetings. So if you really can, consider, because I like Priscilla, I thought that, we were just kicked to the curb this summer because we have not heard from you. It just seems like everything that we've done, all of our work has gotten lost. I'm really glad that you're conducting this meeting and kind of clarifying everything. But I really implore you that you appoint somebody or some group to be responsible, that you're reporting to, not just community people. And thank you for the meeting and everything you're trying to do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gloria. Let's go Vilda and then Francesca.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, I'm 209. I wanted to say, I agree with what has been said, that we need to move forward, keep the ball rolling in a positive way and not get embroiled, because we were a small representation of 13 people, and all of them didn't have votes. The community engagement piece is going to be extremely important. And you do have the tool in place with the website. I'm a big proponent of using the media outreach, just like the DOJ, the California Statewide Reparation Committee did. They engaged the people in reparations throughout the state of California. So I think in agreeing with what Gloria just said, we shouldn't get bogged down with whatever happened with our small little committee, because we're supposed to be working on behalf of the total Russell City community, which its reaches are far beyond even the boundaries of Hayward, because when the people got kicked out, they didn't just stay in Hayward, some went all over. And so I think we should really look at what we started with, which were the 26 recommendations, and then do a sincere outreach to the Russell City community at large. They're out there. They may have totally different ideas than what we came up with, and not get bogged down by the details of what happened. We had a good start. The 26 recommendations are a good start. That doesn't have to be the have-all, the end-all, because there are a lot of other voices out there that are going to be affected by this movement. And thank you very much for where we are, for what everybody did, and let's keep the ball rolling in a positive vein.
Thank you, Vilda. I'm gonna turn it over to Francesca. And then I know we're just over time. There are some folks we haven't heard from, so we could maybe close out Artavia, but let's do a quick round robin. If there's any last comments, you can just pass the mic around the table. I'm sorry, it did not go very far. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I reiterate my previous comments about, the recommendations just getting started. Again, the recommendations, were from the series group. And they're draft recommendations, right? So I don't know if you were present. Well, you were present. I'm not sure if you were, but at some of the public meetings, some of the community, they were confused. They were like, why is the apology on the recommendations? The city already did that. Why does this recommendation sound like this recommendation? Can't 2 or 3 of these recommendations be combined? And so I still believe that the recommendations are in no shape or form ready to go. I don't feel like the council is ready to implement or do anything with the recommendations until the recommendations are refined. How that refinement comes about, if there's another committee that, that is erected, I don't know. But I know that those recommendations are not good to go as is, and they're not ready to be, implemented in any way, in my opinion. That's my opinion. And the second thing I wanted to say is, yes, I do wholeheartedly agree. There needs to be some type of oversight, away from the city, some type of third party that's involved, that can work between the community, and the city.
Thank you, Francesca. So, I know we're over time, and I would love to do a quick round robin before y'all go. I know it's over time. Just want to slide really quickly, completely unrelated, but because in the spirit of equity and inclusion.
Can we just close this and then get to the?
Sure. I just want to make sure people be here for the left. That's fine. There's an announcement in your package about district elections. I want to make sure the community is aware of it. But why don't we start with Arcady? If you want to go first, we can go around. This one, let's try to close us out last. I thought the pastor would be good for preacher.
Okay, right. I want to ask one question
Oh, yeah.
before I make my comment. Will you be speaking tonight, Journal?
I'm not, I'm sorry.
Just like.
Not.
Oh, good.
Okay, so thanks for giving me a couple minutes. I'll be brief. The first thing I want to acknowledge in this space, it's clear that healing needs to happen. And while we don't have the time tonight, Minister Artavia is just a phone call and a text message away to facilitate the healing service. For those of us who made it Black Bear Diner several years ago, we talked about the need to stay in solidarity. This ain't solidarity, y'all. We can say it's solidarity, but it's not. So I'm gonna leave that offer on the table, right? I've done a lot of them. If y'all don't want me, I can find someone else who can help facilitate the healing service. We have to heal amongst ourselves if we're gonna advance this agenda. We can't have this going on. And we have the capacity to heal it. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm confused as to why the committee is ending, because it sounds like there's still work to be done, and I'm a little confused about why this group is being disbanded. If nothing else, it seems like even if they were extended a few more months to look at those recommendations, help give final input, that maybe that would even help facilitate some of the healing, right? So curious about that. If this group is not going to continue, you mentioned public monthly updates. It sounds like those are going to be emailed out. I would ask you all to consider posting those live on Zoom so that people can come, give input, be heard, have some Q&A, so it doesn't feel like, hey, you got a bunch of emails, I don't really know what's going on. I just put that out there. And I really want to hear from Chair Knowles, and I'm sorry, I thought you were your sister.
She couldn't, for those who came a little later, she, got called to the fire.
Okay. I'll reach out to her directly. So I guess what I'm saying is, A, we need healing. 2, how's the continued input? If it's not with this group staying together formally, you all stay together informally. We don't need the city to host a Zoom meeting, right? We don't need the city to take the recommendations and look at them and talk about them and send our feedback back, right? But I do urge us to either set up a committee specifically, or Chair Austin, maybe the CSC can continue to be sort of a hosting spot until we get to that point. I love y'all. We don't work hard together. Let's not let division keep us from getting there. Okay?
I just really want to say that, I agree with a lot of stuff that was. And, but like you said, there's a lot of healing and there's a lot of personal stuff coming out, and you're lashing out on people that, really have no part of it. And we need to, as grown-ups and adults, is work together as a team and not think like, oh, because I'm speaking up and I'm saying something, the reason why I'm speaking up and I'm saying something is because I do not like disrespecting other people. I don't like it. I've seen it, and that's why I feel this whole committee got dismantled
with Russell City, because a lot of people were hurt. And there's a lot of things that need to take place, and we need to trust the process. And like Austin said, is that we can't give up. We gotta keep letting our voices be heard, and if that means going to the Tuesday Hayward City meeting, that's what we gotta do. But I'm fighting for something on the county level, and you know how many times I've been there? Not one time, over 50 times. And I'm gonna keep going until I see change, and it has to do with LGBTs. And,
Thank you. If we can go around it.
I'm done.
Thank you, Francesca Douglas.
I want to thank you for, inviting me to speak. I too was thinking it feels incomplete. I was thinking extension or moving this body to some sort of an advisory role or something, but it's just still unresolved and open-ended. I do feel like there may be a need to have some policy in place so that you can address, you know, the practices moving forward. So it's just right. But I am appreciative to hear the conversation and understand both those things that are working and understand the tension, because that's what exists within the community.
Thank you, Deborah. Austin?
I was honored to be a part of today's discussion on behalf of the Community Services Commission. I also agree it feels a little incomplete. I echo Artavia's point about some potential kind of a healing discussion. Perhaps if and you can take it or leave it, a recommendation that there's a subcommittee with portion of council, not to exceed a majority, but that way it's an honest, kind of closer conversation. In the event that there were, it appears, things the city could have and perhaps should have done differently, and we are always lifelong learners, I believe. Government, the one thing we do best is getting it wrong, and we are able to excel and learn when people come together productively and say, this is where you fell short, and this is how you make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin and Marion.
This needs to continue, absolutely. Recommendations need to be expanded upon. All parties involved need to have, their version of truth being told without interruption. I look forward to seeing what happens.
Thank you, Marion. Tony?
Yeah, I just want to respond to the disrespect comment. The disrespect didn't start until we added our alternates. That's when it started. We were rolling right along. We had a plan. We were doing our thing, but we had to stop and massage personalities. So that disrespect, it didn't start in the beginning. It only ended up that way because we had too many people on our committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Priscilla?
I just want to thank, Aisha for, and the rest of the group for being in our committee. You know, we all have a common goal, you know, to try to, benefit or to try to receive, what is due, you know, and also, the recommendation may not be the perfect thing that we thought about. We talked about it and then we stacked them according to the group, you know, and like I say, some people might think it's perfect, some people might not, but nothing is perfect in life, you know, only God is perfect. But I think we all tried, and I pray that we all continue, you know, into these tasks and achieve something, because this is a common goal, you know, to try to achieve something out of this process, and the time that we have invested, it should not be in vain. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Anna?
If the intention of today's meeting was to be celebratory, it missed the mark, in my opinion. I'm grateful for our guests today, and I hope being here is a reflection of what is potentially on the horizon, especially for the commission for Alameda County. I've joined some subcommittee meetings. My dad has tagged me in, so I've seen I've seen some of those meetings.
and I've watched your general meetings, and so I'm grateful for the work that you're doing on the larger scale. I'm grateful for the work that the two of you have done, and I'm grateful for the work that our leadership team has done, Michael, Deborah, Liz, and Aisha. And I'm grateful, you know, for better or for worse, for all of the members that have participated, because it hasn't been easy. And we would probably still all do it again because we care. We care about our legacy, we care about our ancestors, just, you know, those coming after us. And if this is truly something that is centered on the people and that is trauma-informed and that is not transactional, it cannot continue the way that it's been going. You don't gather a group of people, open the wound, throw them a used Band-Aid, say thank you, and then business as usual, right? We may not all get along all the time, and we don't have to. We can be respectful. We don't all have to be best friends. But if the ultimate objective is to be in service of the Russell City community, and if that means, and here's the thing, it means something different for every single person. And if we can't acknowledge that, put our egos aside, to acknowledge the role that we all play, right? And if folks don't feel comfortable speaking up or asking a question because of time or opinion, or even feeling like there's gonna be a back and forth. In my opinion, this is a space for the steering committee members to share their opinions, not engage in discussion or almost like a back and forth of validation from city staff. Because again, what does the apology mean if we are not moving things forward in a thoughtful, people-centered, trauma-informed kind of way? And my hope is that you've heard, if nothing else, if you didn't listen to the steering committee members, you listened to the guests today and are taking their recommendations. It feels unfinished because it is unfinished. There was no plan. There was a timeline, there was a budget, there was a calendar, and that was it. And we hit the deadline, and here we are. So I hope I, channeled some of my sister right now and did some justice there. And I hope that, in my conversations with Josephine, I gave her some things to take back. And I am hopeful because I'm in it for the long haul, right? And so I have my accountability buddy from Still, and we can text and I can make the phone calls about whatever comes next. But I do think that I hope the city recognizes that we're not going anywhere, whether you have us formally as a group or not. And keep in mind, if you do it again, it's not going to be as pretty, and we're not going to be as nice. Like, I can say that I'm not the chair, right? Like, you have an opportunity to be better and do better, and, here we are.
Thanks, Ayanna. So Michael D.
You said a lot of what I was going to say. One thing too, though, is that if I'm not mistaken, I'm getting to this too, is that if we don't agree with what the city comes up with, as let's say top, we start talking about it, resolution, whatever, right? The first 4 or 5, they come out and we're going to do this, whatever, right? And if we don't agree with that, we need to go to meetings and debate it, right? You have your city meeting, and we go as a representative of this committee, and that in front of everybody, that we did not agree to that. That is not what we sent out, right?
Right.
At the meeting, right? Yeah. We can do that, because when you get there, they ask who anybody wants to talk. You get up and you get in line, right? And you get in there, boom, boom, it's just, well, based off of what our committee did, our committee, we did not agree to this in front of everybody, right? Am I wrong on that, or right on that?
You're right.
Okay, so basically, if there's anything that comes out, if basically, as a group, or even myself, period, do not agree with, then I don't remember us agreeing to this. I don't remember us talking to this and saying, no, this is not true. We did not send this to the city to represent us. Right? Okay, I'm just trying to make sure we understand, because like she said, this can go, south. We were hoping that everything stays, community stays, as a grouping and everything, and it goes smoothly, right? But it came, and, get very controversial. But I do appreciate everybody, and you ladies, you everybody here, that came and everything, but, I know my grandmother, and, me and her like almost had conversations, and, grandmother let it go. It's just, there you go.
I got a great.
Thank you, Master. We will do Liz, and then the folks on the call before wrapping up, Regina, and then a quick announcement. Liz, and I'm gonna ask her just for time, we are about 30 minutes over. We can try to do a minute or less, but I want to hear everyone. Liz?
Well, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be part of this committee. It was an honor to represent my family and think about my grandma, who I lived with along with my life, and, her breathes Russell City. So when this project came about, it was like it was ingrained in me in my DNA already. And just hearing all the stories were echoed through my mind with every funeral I have attended about Russell City, and the Russell City Church is part of the Hayward Church, where my parents still attend. So this has a lot of heart with me, and I just appreciate all the voices, because they all matter. And this has never been done before. So we are going to be making these mistakes. We could have, should have, did, but we're learning through the process, and I value everybody, and I wish we could have done things different, but it just didn't happen that way, and I don't want to keep going back, the recommendations weren't ours and they were ours, because I personally wrote some of those on that retreat that weekend, what I wanted to see happen, and they were part of some of those recommendations. And it maybe didn't one size fit all, but we can expand on those, like it was brought up earlier, their draft, and we can nail, or, just drill them down to be satisfied to most people, because they won't ever satisfy the whole world. We can't even get along with nations, right? So it's not gonna happen here either. But I just really, also, like, if you think some of the recommendations are duplicate, like the apology, for instance, this is definitely a framework that we wanted to put an apology, even though we got one from the county, maybe we'll get one from Oro Loma, maybe we'll get one from San Leandro. Any of the players that are benefiting from Russell City, we could get an apology from them too, so we should not sell short for asking for more apologies, because there's other people that have their hand in this, or benefiting it. So that's all I wanted to say for today, and I thank you for the time. I thank you, Regina, I thank you for you coming in late in the game, but I just appreciate everybody's work, because we're all doing this together for one common goal, to heal and repair the land, or repair. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm gonna really briefly go to folks online and then have Regina close out. Gloria, and let's go Gloria, CJ, Zelda, Michael.
Yeah, just disagreeing with some of the comments that have already been made. I hope that we can move forward and move away from all of the contentiousness and the dissension that we had in the group. I think that we accomplished a lot. I think that the RCRJP's charge from the Community Service Commission was to form a group of former residents and descendants, and to determine the appropriate restitution for the city of Hayward's involvement in the inequitable treatment and the forced relocation of the residents of Russell City. And for me, that's my goal. What is the appropriate restitution? Let's work together. We're not the enemy. It wasn't, our group is not the enemy. We're trying to get what's due to us for all the pain and suffering that our ancestors endured. So the focus shouldn't be on, we don't like the recommendations, or we don't, none of us probably agree with all 26 recommendations, but we are truly all on the same page. We want compensation, whatever that, our land, of course, is first and foremost, even though maybe it wasn't spelled out to your satisfaction in the recommendations, but we all know that's what we want first and foremost, our land and fair compensation for the pain and suffering. And I just implore the group that we work together and that we have some kind of representation, that we have a seat at the table, and that our voices are heard cohesively as a community. And we are one. It's not, we're not the enemy. The enemy is not within our group. The enemy is the government, the elected officials, the corporate America. That's our enemy. It's not within. So I just hope that we can come together and work together and get this done. Let's make our voices as one. It should be one. We can't have the dissension from Russell City. So I appreciate everybody's input. I enjoyed working with everyone. We have Josephine now at the table and Regina, and I just hope that they'll listen to us, as a group, and that they'll make sure that City Council and the mayor take some kind of action so this doesn't drag on for 3 or 4 years. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Gloria. CJ, Belda, Michael, and then Regina.
Sure. I have so many things to say, but first of all, it's on behalf of my ancestors, I'm glad to be here and to be able to have this conversation. One of the things I want to say is that the characterization of conversation, discussion, pushback, and appeals doesn't necessarily have to be seen as conflict. It is what will happen when we are going for such a monumental issue and so many different particular aspects of it. It will be that way. But one of the things that I push back on is the expectation of how often people of color are expected to be nice and to say thank you and so much. Thank you so much for helping me. Thank you so much. At the end of the day, we are dealing with the entity, not the individuals here today, that disrespectfully stole land from our ancestors. And our willingness to even come to the table, to have the conversation, to continue to be here today is the most respect that we were raised to give in general for a disrespectful act of not you individual city people, but the city of Hayward. So that is one that we, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed of me constantly being clear and plain, speaking in this tone, to say, I disagree that the representation, that these were our recommendations, so on and so forth. Those are all valid. And I think one of the things I push back against is that we all have to have an agreement. And everyone wants us to quickly go to, let's just all agree, let's get along, let's have prayer, let's do all these things. We can have differences. We don't have to like or dislike each other personally. Most of you, Gloria, I've known all my life, but a lot of you are just mad. I can't make assumptions about who you are, but please don't do the same for others when we are here on behalf of our ancestors. And one of the things that I worry about with the process is that when you literally hear that factually the research can't be correct, it is not to be mean to Cirrus or anything, but we put this whole thing in jeopardy if we attempt to sweep under the rug real questions. And the city and the state, the county, all of us put at risk the validity of this, because anyone can quickly look at this, if it's not us, true opposing forces, and say, this is not valid or reliable. And so just note that some of the concerns are not, we're looking for it to be just what we want or to be satisfied. It's concern about this being a true, legitimate undertaking that can withstand questions. So that's important. And the last thing I will say is why that's so important and why I think you see some sensitivities about sort of this forced, you know, everybody's happy and this is all great. Let's all get along. Let's not talk about some obvious things that are just wrong with some of the data collection, et cetera, is that in looking at, thank you, Ms. Gloria, around bringing the testimony of my great-grandfather and my grandmother who were literally begging to keep their land. And they participated with earnest honesty, thinking that their input would actually make a difference, that they would be allowed to keep their home. And it was all a ploy. It was never the intention for them to ever keep it. And they begged. I hated hearing my grandma try to explain that her house was clean, as if that would somehow stop what was a train that was already in motion. And the city of Hayward, I implore you that that's not what you want this to seem like, that not only for the first time did that happen, it was just a show. And no matter what my grandma said or what my great-grandpa said, it was still going to happen. What we're sharing with you, honestly, is this should not be a show. When people are telling you enough, half of the committee is saying, we didn't recommend, I mean, it's great. I'm not saying it's that good, there's some good stuff there, but it wasn't a process. We went to that little retreat to develop boxes of how we would begin to get to recommendations. And all of a sudden it became recommendations. And that's why things like an apology slipped in. So I would just implore you that this is not about causing conflict or not getting along or liking people. I don't know any of you, except for Auntie Gloria, that, you know, everybody else is relatively new. Nice to meet you. But what we're saying is the validity and reliability of this process, which started out with such a beautiful intention, is jeopardized when we literally want to just move along, get along, everybody be happy and sing Kumbaya. And we can do that. And generations from now, we will look back and someone will uncover, but what's simply easy to uncover, that the facts of the process don't support the conclusions. And we took that and ran with it as if it were. So I just implore you to be careful and to be cautious about ramrodding. And it's not a shade on any person this through when there are repeated concerns about the validity and reliability of this project. When you say this speaks for the community, it clearly doesn't. Doesn't mean it isn't good recommendations, but we should just be very careful that generations from now, we don't look back and we say, what was that? That was not really real. Although we did hard work. So that's all I will say, is that we don't have, our bodies and our voices don't need to be policed. That if I were to speak straight and clear and really communicate my disagreement with something, it doesn't mean I'm demeaning or disrespecting anyone. It doesn't mean I don't like anybody. I like my family. That's who I know. The rest of you, nice to meet you. But telling us how to behave, or if we communicate in a certain way that we're being this or that, that's not what we're here for. We ask that we be allowed to express ourselves clearly and respectfully. But again, ultimately, the disrespectful act was what happened to my great-grandfather and great-grandmother and my grandmother and my mother and my father. That was disrespectful.
Thank you, CJ. We'll go to Velda, Michael B, and then Regina to close us out. Velda? I think you're still muted. Why don't you do some background noise, Velda?
Okay, great. So my closing comment will be, I think the most important thing moving forward is obviously this is a work in progress. What we have on the table is like phase one of probably, 7 phases. I'm just saying an arbitrary number. This is definitely an evolutionary process. And I think most importantly, whatever body evolves from this to continue this process, they must be open public meetings that are well advertised to reach the Russell City community at large, because this is not a little microscopic community. It's a larger community. And I think most important, if we want to get to the nut of things, not going backwards, but to hear the voice of the Russell City community through public engagement, through community engagement. And I thought that was part of the agenda tonight. Maybe I didn't hear it on my phone, what the plan was for the community engagement moving forward, the larger community outside of the Russell City Reparative Justice Committee.
Thank you, Velda. Last but not least, Michael B. Johnson.
Yes, first I would just want to make sure that I acknowledge Aisha Knowles, and Liz Sanchez. The work that they did on this committee, the level of disrespect that they endured by some city officials with regards to communication, transparency, all the things that it took to do the work, and to do it in addition to their daily jobs. I just want to thank them for what they went through and what they did to hold our group together. The second thing I would say is that when it is all said and done, what we allow is what will continue. And what happened to this community 61 years ago now is reflective of what we experienced throughout this process. The level of engagement, the lack of transparency, and the reality that those who were chosen to shepherd the responsibility from the city cannot, and do not to this day, fully appreciate the level of continued pain that they inflicted on members of this steering committee by the way that they handled various members of this steering committee. To literally appreciate that these are real people with real lives. It reminds me of that Black man that was on that steering committee 60 years ago, right? Who was asked to sit on that committee and ended up being the head of the Oakland Housing Authority. Concerned with a paycheck in the future, not concerned with the community at all. And to feel that someone in our own community could be used that way is frustrating and appalling for me and for my family. And finally, I would say the level of attack that various members of this community, of this steering committee suffered and endured, when the reality is that I can't speak for anybody else, but for me and my family, we were given a charge 20, 30 years ago, before there was even an apology. And those words that were given to us was that if Hayward ever did anything about getting our land back, that we were supposed to go get it. It didn't matter if I was on the steering committee or not. It doesn't matter who was on the steering committee or not. And finally, I will say, yes, Octavia, your recollection, your perception about hurt and harm and healing that needs to take place as a result of what happened here is very real. There are some relationships throughout this process that were severely damaged. That if I had my druthers, I would just walk away because I don't want to deal with foolishness like the foolishness that I had to deal with. I'm not calling anybody a fool. I'm calling the process and the things that we had to endure during the process. We spent more time stroking egos and trying to get people voted off of committees than we did on focusing on the work.
Thank you, wasting time.
The work was what was neglected because we were worried about stroking people's egos instead of figuring out how we repaired the harm, restored the land, and repaid the debt. We lost our focus and we did damage in the process as a result of it. And so in the future going forward, it's got to be less about egos and people's feelings and more about the work that needs to be done to restore the harm and repair the debt and repay the debt that this community has experienced and has further endured through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael D. And thank you all for your comments. Thank you for spending an extra 45 minutes. I know we're over. I wanted to give Regina a moment to close us out. And then before I do that, just for you. Want to say thank you all for sharing the time, and for all the feedback. Really quickly, just a note, Skip Shepherd, Hayward is moving to district elections. There's a lot of engagement happening around that, so I gave you all a printout with more information. And for those online, if you visit maphayward.org, that has information. So if you have community members, other loved ones in the city, it's a really big change going from every single elected person being that part of a district. So back to Russell City and closing us out, Regina.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your candor, appreciate you coming into this space, being vulnerable and open. The work does continue, and Josephine will be in touch about next steps. And, you know, we didn't get a chance to cover the plan for continued engagement, but we'll make sure that we get that out to you. And certainly my door is always open, my phone is always open. Many members reach out, call, whatever, text, say something, just drop by. So that's fine, I'm here if you need me.
All right, thank you, everyone. There's a lot of extra food and drinks. Feel free to grab some, grab a jug, help you take it home.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
No, I know, later. Sorry, y'all. Thank y'all for staying later.